All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here in the 115 class, Mentoring Matters. My name is J.D. Buckner, and I'm the pulpit minister at the Lebanon Road Church of Christ. And I'm honored to pair with our youth minister today, Andrew Thompson, and mostly excited about what he is going to share during our time together. A program that he has been working on and been developing for the last 3 years now. I believe this month will begin the third season of our mentoring program. So a lot of information to share there, but you know that the title of our class is Mentoring Matters. And it really does matter. You know, the New Testament may not explicitly mention, something like older people mentoring toward younger people, but there are a lot of passages in the New Testament that encourage mentoring, teaching, providing guidance and wisdom to others, including older people to younger people. Just some of those that you might consider are these three passages here. Titus 2, 3 through 5 speaks about older women and their sharing in mentoring, if you will, toward younger women. Older women are to be reverent in the way they live, not slanderers or addicted to wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and children, be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, to be subject to their husbands, so that no one will malign the Word of God. So there's perhaps one of the most explicit examples of an older generation guiding and teaching and mentoring to a younger generation. In 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 12, you see that there's a focus here of being an example. When Paul tells Timothy, don't let anyone look down on you because of your youth, but set an example to the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. So you see here again this implied sort of mentorship, the influence that an older person might have on Timothy to be one who looks down or to be one who encourages. And then certainly Timothy, in response to those who are older to him and among his peers and the younger, an idea of sharing and mentoring. In 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 5, in the same way, you who are younger, submit yourselves to your elders. So certainly there we can see the idea of a mentoring, a learning from another generation. All of you clothe yourself with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Now, while we can consider those things in the Bible, and we can see some explicit examples, some implicit examples, we can certainly make these necessary inferences that a vital part of the church is for older or more mature believers to have an active role in helping younger believers. And Andrew might expound even more on that in just a moment. The impact that creates in faith building, solidifying faith, and helping young believers remain faithful throughout all their life. The New Testament itself emphasizes the importance of intergenerational relationships within the church, with older believers providing guidance, teaching, and support to younger believers. And as I've said, this will be the third year now. Andrew has integrated this program and has refined this program. And I hope today, as he shares it with you, it will be a blessing to you and an encouragement and a way to look at being very intentional in how older believers might mentor to younger believers and thus strengthen the church as a whole. Now I'm going to turn it over to Andrew so he can share the good stuff. Thank you.
So why are we talking about mentoring? First of all, the Connect Conference is all about go and make disciples, right? And so if we're making disciples, we have some fertile ground sitting right in our churches and our young people. And a lot of times we've left our young people in the hands of youth ministers, which is fine, but what we're finding out is that when we leave it in the hands of the youth minister isn't able to make all the connections that need to be made in order for our young people to continue in their faith into college and into the next stage of their life. The other reason we talk about mentoring is we all realize that we do lose young people from the church at an alarming rate. And the statistics prove that. Millennials, which is the category I fall into, 59% have left the church. Gen Z, which is the current generation that are in youth ministry and youth groups, the current students we're ministering to, they're now the largest group that's claiming atheism. And our oldest generations in churches, the traditionalists and the baby boomers, they're the ones that are most consistent within the church. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what do you notice? If our oldest generations are the most consistent and our youngest generations are losing the church, or leaving the church and losing their faith, there's a big gap there. And the church will eventually just die off with the traditionalists and the baby boomers. And so how do we bridge that gap? How do we make those connections between each generation and the church? That's why mentoring matters. That's why we're talking about it. How can we develop in our students a faith that is going to last them well beyond their high school years? There's a lot of different ways to approach that question. For us today, we're talking about one approach that I have found to be very instrumental in what we're doing at Lebanon Road that I want to share with you. It's first started with this book right here. If you've never read this book, I would highly encourage you to get it and read it. It's called Sticky Faith, Everyday Ideas to Build Lasting Faith in Your Kids. They also noticed a problem with kids leaving the church, and they wanted to know why. And they asked the question why, and they did a lot of research behind what is presented in this book. And they followed teenagers as they graduated high school and they went off into college. And the ones that stayed around, they just simply asked the question, why did you stick? Why did your faith stick? Why did you stay? And they found 4 things that were instrumental in the lives of each of these kids. The first one being intergenerational relationships. And this is a term that is becoming more common in churches, but when I was growing up, the term intergenerational didn't really exist in the church. You kind of had the youth and the kids and everybody else. And there was definitely a gap between the two. And so they said that despite the age segregation that exists in our churches and broader culture, each young person is greatly benefited when surrounded by a team of 5 adults, and they call that a 5-to-1 ratio. And not just surrounded by adults, but adults who impact them in a spiritual way that later on in life they can still call them by name. So as we sit here today, if I were to say, hey, what are 5 adults in your life that impacted you spiritually, you could probably name at least 5, if not more. So that's an important thing that they found. Also, the whole gospel. Sometimes young people see faith as something that they can put on and take off like a jacket based on their behavior and who they're around and things like that. And these students said, well, we understood the gospel in a way that made sense to us, where we could integrate faith into our life, the applications of it. And we do a real good job a lot of times of like teaching kids the history and the timeline and how everything happened in the Bible. But sometimes we miss the boat when we're not showing them how that applies to them too. So the whole gospel. And the other is partnership with families. Youth ministry for a long time, it was the youth minister and it was families, and there really wasn't a partnership there. That's why you see an influx of family ministers now, or youth and family ministers, because along the way, even though we know what Scripture says about the role of parents in the spiritual development of kids, it just was youth ministry. and parents and families weren't really involved. And so what they found is with these kids, the youth ministry partnered with their families and helped the families to have the resources and tools in their home to build a spiritual foundation, and the youth minister would come alongside and assist them in that building of a spiritual foundation. And the last was a safe place for doubt. I find this one to be very important. When I was growing up, I grew up in a rural country church in Alabama. You didn't really ask questions because if you ask questions, then you must be doubting your faith. And if you doubted your faith, then you must not be a good Christian. Well, what they found was young people really just want conversations. When they're trying to study Scripture and decipher what's going on, they want somebody to be able to go to and ask questions, and not just somebody that's going to like say, "Well, this is the way it is." That's the answer I got a lot growing up. It was, "This is the way it is. You don't have to question it." But I always wanted to know, well, why is it this way? And sometimes those answers weren't provided to me. So they found that kids want conversations, not just answers. So we at Lebanon Road, we saw this and we were like, well, what can we do? And so we hit on this idea of mentoring, intergenerational relationships, which I'm really going to go over here in a minute. And we have some of our mentors in the room, and they can give a little bit of feedback here too. But as we open up this idea, we're going to open up this question and allow you to kind of answer it. Why is mentoring to teens important?
You've already walked the steps they're getting ready to walk.
Y-
You've been there and you've done that, and you can tell them.
Yeah. Yeah, you can help them in their journey because you've already walked some of those roads that they're walking on. Yeah, very good. Wow. Yeah, if they're not getting mentored by people in the church, where are they going to go to? They're going to go to their friends. They're going to go to other influences in their life, maybe TikTok, social media. There's a lot of voices out there that they can go to. And if we're not mentoring them, then they're going to get it from somewhere else, right?
Andrew, I was thinking about your first slide with the statistics. If you see that the oldest generation are the largest and most faithful, and the youngest generation are one of the struggling the most, it just indicates to you that there's something the older generation has worthy to share with the younger generation. Like, how did we stay faithful when we're struggling like that? Just tells
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something to be said for the traditionalists and the baby boomers that are still present in the church and their need to share that faith with the younger generations. Yes.
You know, there's that statistic, a new family comes to church, they need to build at least 7 relationships with the staff.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a similar correlation with you. They don't have people that they look up to, across the room, they're going to have relationships elsewhere.
Yeah.
And if they don't have those relationships in the church, then why are they going to?
Yeah. That's very true. I think relationships is definitely a key to all this. If they don't have relationships within the church, say they go off to college and they move back to your town, if they don't have relationships within that church, are they going to come back to that church? Probably not. All right, so I got some mentors sitting in the room. Why did you decide to mentor our kids? Now, I didn't twist anybody's arm, okay? I did not twist anybody's arm.
We can let them know that they're not all alone.
Yeah.
Plus, like he said, you tend to think when you're young that old people have never done anything. But if you have a mentoring relationship and you can share things, same struggles, there might be different
Yeah.
Context.
things to
Yeah.
add in, but you have the same struggles that they have now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, kids don't think that though. They think that they're the only ones that have ever struggled. And so mentoring is important because you can share in those struggles together.
We've had so many people pour into us, and so like you said, it's definitely easy to just step up and be able to pour into them. It's not hard to just go out to eat on occasion or just check in on them. And it's a pretty easy act that means so much. And it's almost like really nice to have someone be like, hey, will you partner with this one kid? Because that's way less overwhelming to me than like, oh, I know I should form a relationship with someone and there's all these people that I don't know what to do. And so this is just like a perfect way to make it easy for us. And they know that it's expected and we know it's expected. So it takes the awkwardness away when like we know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Intentionality.
Yeah.
I think also you've had each of our leaders so nobody gets left out. This is the outgoing leader that give a lot of attention. There are those that are really quiet that they don't get as much attention. But everybody has somebody. Everybody has somebody. And then it's a blessing to us because two that we mentored last time come back and give us a hug at church. So, how you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And I see it as an, the Bible talks about passing things down from generation to generation. And in Judges 2, it talks about how there was a whole generation that did not know God and they did evil in the sight of God. I think about the people who mentored me or taught me or was an impact on me spiritually. And now, why would I not, as an adult, want to do the same for the next generation? I know how valuable that is. All of us that are sitting in the room know how valuable it was to have adults in your life that shared the gospel with you, that taught you along the way, that was there to share struggles with you. And why would we not want to pass that down to the next generation and be that for them too? And so that's why mentoring is important, because we play a vital role in the lasting impact of faith in today's generation. And so there's this observation that I've noticed, though, even as I grew up and even at churches, is while intergenerational connections are important, and we know they are, they're infrequent. And a lot of that is the kind of the awkwardness. The kids don't want to spend time with me. All these things that we come up with to not do that. One feedback I got from our mentoring one time was it feels forced. It is a little forced, kind of. Like I don't twist anybody's arm, but I do pair you with somebody. And so I put it in this kind of context. If you weren't a mentor, would you walk up to a kid and ask them about a game they played in? Would you walk up to them and ask them how school is going? Would you walk up to them and just simply say, "How are you?" Those kind of conversations are very infrequent because for whatever reason, it's almost like Congress, we just don't cross the aisle. There's the youth group over here and they have their spot and they sit and, we're not going to walk down there and talk to them. Again, reality is students could also go cross-generational lines, but let's be real, they're not going to do that either. So us adults have to be the ones to kind of step out and make that connection. And I think that one of the reasons why these connections are infrequent, I think, is one of the reasons why we lose some of our kids along the way. I remember when I went off to college, the church that I grew up with, they assigned an elder to me. And so that elder was always checking in on me. But I also know of other places where they just kind of send the college kids off and not intentionally, but they somewhat forget about them. And then when that happens, it's hard for those kids to want to come back and be a part of the church too. So there's a lot of things that we can do along the way. So I saw this as a need at Lebanon Road, and I asked myself, how can we do this? It took a lot of planning. It took a lot of calling people that had tried mentor programs before that didn't work. It took calling people that are doing mentor programs that are working and try to figure out how to mesh the two things so that this can be successful in the long term. So we talked about the 5-to-1 ratio. For every one student, they should have 5 adults in their life they can call by name who have spiritually impacted their life. At Lebanon Road, we ideally have a 10-to-1 ratio. When they enter 7th grade, which is when our youth group starts, they're paired with an adult every year until they graduate college. I think the college aspect of this is very important because they still need a connection to their home church. Without that, it makes it easy for them to slip through the cracks. Because if they have somebody checking on them, mentoring them even in college, they can ask the hard questions like, well, have you found a church home? Or where are you worshiping? Or, things like that. And having a 10-to-1 ratio sounds like a lot, but not every year will a student have the best mentor. And so we sort of have some leeway there that hopefully within those 10, at least 5 of them are good mentors for them that they connect with. So what does that look like at Lebanon Road? Well, for us, this is how we started. I said I made phone calls and I talked to a lot of people. I read Sticky Faith. They had ideas in there. There's also a companion to Sticky Faith that is called the Youth Workers Edition that will give you a lot of ideas as a youth minister, how to help create faith that will last in your kids. So I would highly recommend that book. And there's also a companion to that as well that's a parents edition. So if you want to give a resource to your parents, it will help them to even understand how to be intentional in building relationships outside of a mentoring program for their kids. So those are all good tools to put in your toolbox. So I read Sticky Faith. I called people. We spent a whole quarter talking about the different generations that make up the church. From the traditionalists, which is the oldest of our members, to Gen Z, and whatever the new generation is going to be called, which is our youngest members. And it was important to do that because the church is a multi-generational church. And along the way, we have to understand each other. Sometimes there's this great divide of old people and young people. That's how we look at it sometimes. But what I wanted to do with this class is sort of break down that barrier and just simply be the church. And so we looked at the traditionalists and we understood why maybe they had struggled with change. Because they lived through World War II and the Great Depression and all these things that happened in their life that was out of their control. And they simply, because of that, they like stability. They like stability in their life because of all these changes that were happening in the world at the time. And so because of that filters into the church sometimes, and they want things to remain the same as they knew it growing up. And so we were able to understand that. And now we look at Gen Z, which is totally opposite. There's new social media apps coming out all the time. They communicate via text more than they do an actual conversation. I'm not sure that our teenagers even know how to have a face-to-face conversation. But with mentoring, maybe we can teach them how to do that. And they're not just screenagers, as sometimes they're called. But we were able to look at what these generations brought to the table and how they benefited the church, and to understand that all of us are valuable in God's kingdom. And so from there, we launched our mentoring program. And what the sheets that I gave out, if you came in late, I'll get you one. But the sheets that I gave you out is really what I placed in the hands of every individual to kind of highlight a little bit of what we were trying to do. I was able to preach a sermon about it, so we tried to really set it up before we just launched it out there. And so really what this boils down to is connections. At the end of the day, we want connections. At the very minimum, what I ask of every one of our mentors is when they're inside the church building to have a conversation with their student. That's the minimum. Because I think that's where it starts. if we're not seeking out those conversations even in our church buildings, then it's going to be hard to mentor a student. So that's the minimum. Obviously, it expands from there. Some mentors are able to go to like sporting events and watch their kids do the things that they enjoy. They take them out to dinner after church, do all kinds of things. One really cool thing that came this last year, which was very organic, is there was a mentor and a student, and they found out that they both enjoyed baking, and so they got together and they baked bread and they took it to some of our shut-ins. Now that doesn't happen without mentoring. That doesn't happen without mentoring. That mentor, I can guarantee you, would not have gone to that student and been like, hey, do you want to come over and bake some bread, unless they'd been paired together. And that was really cool, because sometimes you find out things along the way that you have things in common. One of Eric shared with me at lunch today, he was a director at Making Music. I didn't know that about him, but we have a student that's going to be directing their club's Making Music at Freed this year. That's a connection that they can have, because I wouldn't have known that without the mentoring program. And this student probably wouldn't have known that either without a mentoring program. So there's a lot of good that happens along the way. And so we pair them up. I take a couple months, allow people to sign up. Usually the last 2 weeks I have to go begging for people, but that's okay. Sometimes people just need their arms twisted a little bit or guilt tripped to do something good. But so we do that. And then I take the list. I have all of our students in a list, and I have all of our mentors in a list, and I try to pair them up. I look at it and say, I think this person would be good with this person, based on things that I know. And sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it doesn't. But as we've gone along the way, some adults have been more vocal about like saying, things that I don't even know. Like, hey, I think these people would pair well, and this is why. And so it's good to have that, as we go along, and people are understanding the mentoring program a little better. It's good to have those people in your ear giving you some positive reinforcements. Then we have a kickoff. We have a catered lunch together, and at that kickoff, it's not really a draft, but that's where we reveal who is going to be paired with their mentor that year. And they get a picture taken. And one thing that we did, since it was our second year this last August, in that picture, it was like a big growing family picture. That student had all their mentors in the picture with them. And so as they go on, hopefully more and more adults fill that picture with them. So by the time they graduate, they have, 10 adults standing around them, which I think will be really cool whenever we get to that day. And at that kickoff, they're given an informational packet that just gives them some ideas of what to do during the school year with their students. If there's specific planned events such as service projects or game nights or anything like that, we give that to them at that time too. And also, there's an information sheet on the back for the mentor to fill out and give to their student. And the student also fills out an information sheet and gives it to their mentor. That's important because that helps them to know birthdays. For students, it helps them to know their mentor's anniversary, important dates that they can celebrate along the way. It also helps our mentors to know just up front what our kids like. Where do they like to eat? What's their favorite candy? What's their favorite soda? What do they do for fun? That sort of thing, just to kind of get that jump started. One thing that we did this last year that we tried for the first time, and we're going to do it again, is we actually had a class, one quarter, that was just our mentors and students in a class together. Because eventually, the idea is that this would turn into sort of a spiritual mentorship at some point. You can't really do that until you build a relationship. And so to expedite that, we did a class. And several mentors and students sat around a round table, and it was solely a discussion class, and they basically learned off each other, which was really cool to watch as that all played out. intergenerational opportunities. And so we're going to do that again this year. So also something we're introducing this year is as a mentor midweek hangout. So on Wednesday nights before church, we're going to have an opportunity for mentors and students to come together, enjoy a meal, play some games, just something low-key, again, building relationships and connections. What they get from me is I try to give them as much support as I can throughout the year. A lot of it is in that packet that I give to them ahead of time, but every Monday, not every, I wish it was every Monday, but I'm going to be real. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Most Mondays, I send out an email to all of our mentors with ideas on what they could do that week with their student to help build a relationship. One of the cool things, I'm sure at your church on Fifth Sundays, the youth minister may preach, or at least the students are doing worship that day. And so I've started encouraging our mentors to invite their student to worship with them on those Sundays. And it's really cool when I get up to speak, to look around the auditorium and see those connections. Because our youth group doesn't sit together on Sunday mornings because we have class afterwards. And so a lot of them come in and sit with their families and worship with their families. And so on the fifth Sunday, I ask our mentors to just kind of adopt them into their family for that day and worship with them. So that's kind of neat. What are some other things that maybe I've left out?
I believe it heavily implied the idea of consistency,
Mm-hmm.
making sure you're always on top, but always with them, always checking in.
Yeah.
Once a month is consistent, but once a week is much more consistent. You really build a relationship much faster.
Yeah. Consistency is a very important thing to this, which is, again, why I stress the importance of when you're in the church building and you're both there, make that contact, make that conversation. In the packet, I think it also encourages our mentors at least once a week to send a text to check in, see how their week's going. Consistency is very, very important to this.
How often, once a week, is that what you're talking about with your children that are there, or like college?
Yeah,
How often would you check in with the college?
well, the college group, you need to check in still once a week, but it'll be in a different form because they won't be there for worship if they've moved off. Doty's had some college kids. She can speak more to that.
But you don't always see that appreciation. I just want you to be more than
I text people now that don't do this, that don't text me back.
Yeah. I mean, same with a youth group, that you might text them and not hear from them, but they read it. They just might not respond.
Something a lot of our mentors will do is say, what can I pray for you?
Mm-hmm.
That way, one, it tells them they're praying for them, and it asks them a question so that they're more likely to respond than just reading something, and it invites them into, a deeper conversation if they have anything to discuss about their life. Something that I think I personally love about our mentoring that's happened at Lebanon Road is just organically, I think this has especially happened just with the women. A lot of our students that are friends, their mentors have gotten together as groups. And so like a lot of the girls, we get our mentors together, and like the adults and the kids will go in big groups. And so it's just made like more adults and more kids have relationships even outside of like the set mentoring group. And that's happened some with the guys too. And so it's just more influences that more people that get to impact each other, and that's really powerful as well.
Yeah, and that reminds me, like when they sign up, they decide, do they want to do this as an individual or as a team. A lot of husband and wives will pair up. This year, maybe a couple of like guys that pair up and become a team and take on a kid. And the other thing just left my mind, but I'll probably remember it.
Married couples.
What's that?
Married couples.
Yeah, married couples. Mhm. Yeah. Oh, one benefit that a mentor, and it's on the bottom of that sheet, is that you also get to know that student's family too. Like, y'all can have family dinners together, or I know there's some families that go hiking together and they do things together, and they've gotten to know not just the student but also that family as well, which has built even more connections within the church. So, in a nutshell, that's what it looks like. You may have questions along the way. That's my contact information. So, like, if you want to send me an email and say, hey, what does that packet look like? I'll be glad to send that to you. Or what does, your sign up look like? I'll be glad to share that with you. But right now, I'm going to open the floor. If you have questions in the moment about what we do, I'll be glad to answer them the best I can. Generally, it's been a positive feedback. I've had no parent come up to me and say, I don't want my child to participate in that anymore. Because I think they do see the value in it. And like I said, we did a lot of preparation up to it. It wasn't just like, hey, we're going to do this and this is the way it is. We had classes and sermons and everything to kind of prepare people's minds to what we were trying to do. And a lot of those parents, like I said, on the flip side, has gotten to know the adults that are mentoring their kids too.
And to that, I think depending on the family, like it operates differently. Like I think in the age of the kid, whether the mentor goes through, maybe the parents to set up things with the student, or whether they work with the student themselves. But I know I've mentored college students, but I've mentored a middle schooler this year. And so her mom has reached out to me and been like, hey, I want to let you know that she's having a rough day and can you reach out to her? So like, it's like we get to join in that partnership sometime and they can help,
Yeah.
it's someone else that they can go
Yeah.
to help with their bit of things.
I just thought maybe the parents might resent someone else that think, well, that's my job.
Yeah.
Mr. Mike, to answer that, I've been, the first year I was a mentor, and then I got two boys in the youth group, so they have mentors. And what I've seen is a lot of collaboration, like their mentors will call and to say, hey, I want you to know that you're the parents, and I just want to be a help to whatever I can. Is there ways that I can help? So it turns it into not an infringement or a competition, but a collaboration, kind of like what Whitney was saying too. And I think that's probably the key, because that can arise,
Yeah.
I don't want someone, rearing my kids. I want to do that. But to collaborate is something that needs to happen, and is only helpful to the kids. And so I think that perspective or approach has been helpful in my case.
So I guess one question I have kind of relates to what the Boy Scouts call it, youth protection.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, everybody has to go through a background check.
yeah, I guess from that standpoint, at our church, we try to create policies where you never have a one-on-one situation with adult and child.
Yeah.
You don't have one-on-one texting, anything like that. But I guess do you guys typically pair female with female or couple with, I guess whatever?
Yeah. Yeah, it's generally male to male, female to female. If they're a couple, they can go either way. In the beginning, I encourage our mentors to be very mindful and careful of finding themselves in that situation. As far as I know, like, for example, the baking bread that I talked about earlier, the wife was present there too. And so we don't have those policies necessarily in place, but we do caution them because we know what can happen. And everybody that is a mentor does have to submit to a background check. And so that's one way that we try to protect our students.
Let me ask you this as a follow-up. We haven't been able to get off the ground because of getting mentors, but one thing we have considered is attaching a group of mentors to a grade.
Yeah.
And then them following them. Never thought about the college, because that's actually an excellent thing to keep on. But do you think it's better to have a one-on-one mentor or like a group mentor just specifically assigned to, this group of students?
Yeah, I think you have to find what works best for you. I personally think having an adult assigned to you gives you more opportunities to build a relationship. But like for example, at Mount Juliet, they have somewhat of a mentoring program, and they pair kids, several kids, with adults, and it's more of a group type thing. And it may be there's probably different reasons why they do that, but this can look a lot of different ways. This is just how we do it. I think everybody has to figure out what works best for them. Yeah. Anything else? Eric, you can ask me later. I'm just kidding. All right, go ahead.
I think it's important just to caution. I think it's depending on who the mentor is. I think sometimes you may feel like, oh, my kid was a dud, for like and it didn't go as well as I wanted it to.
Yeah.
So I feel like I am a failure as a mentor and get discouraged, maybe don't want to do it again. And I think it's just important to recognize that someone in your mentoring program finds themselves in that situation, say, hey, it's not your fault. Like you do what you can. Sometimes the kids aren't in a place where they're as responsive to the efforts as they might be in the following year. So they might get a kid who just connect and it's real great. But just wanted to throw that out there. Something to be mindful of.
Yeah.
If it doesn't go well, it doesn't mean that whoever the mentor is just the worst person because it didn't go well.
Yeah, in that same vein, one thing that I did with the kids this last year before we got into it was I actually had a specific class for them to say, what is your role in this? And to help them understand it's a two-way street. Because sometimes kids just think that the mentor should give and give and give, and there's no give back. And so whether that improved communication, I don't know. But at least they knew up front like what even was expected of them in this relationship too.
I gotta say something else that's worked for us, which isn't really a direct one-to-one. I think we're gonna try to turn into a program, just call it like Pep Squad or whatever we call it. A parent said that their son was down, but he was having like his final baseball game, so we just posted on our church, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
church software. A group came of just random individuals, and they made signs. If they were obnoxious, he would make eye contact. But the kid before would not speak to anyone, and the kid after communicates.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, we probably embarrassed him, but just by putting a random group of church people together to watch him and surprise him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great idea. And at the bottom line, what you showed them is that you care. And that's ultimately what this is about too, just showing simply that you care. And that the church does love even the youngest of our kids. And so, our mentors also go around and do that. We used to do something called Fan Van, but it was mostly youth group centered where the students would go and, cheer and all that. So that is a great encouragement for sure. Okay, well, I think we're out of time. Again, if you have questions, there's that. And I want to leave you with this thought. Values are caught more than taught, and voices fade over time and need reinforcement. And so mentoring is important because the kids need that reinforcement in their life of spiritual values from even our oldest generations in the church. So let's pray together and then be on our way. Father, we are grateful for this time that we had together, and I just pray that you will bless each and every individual in this room as they work for your kingdom, as they go out and make disciples, and I pray that opportunities that you place in front of us we will take hold of. And Father, help us today to understand the importance of just all the different relationships within the church between the many generations and how that makes an impact on the church and the health of the church. And Father, I just pray for our students. They have so many things that they compete with in this life, but I pray that their eyes are fixed on you and that you are leading them in the ways that they need to go. Thank you, Father, for loving us and allowing us this opportunity to speak to you through prayer. And it's in your Son's name I pray. Amen.